It is 6 p.m., so I will call the June 25th, 2024 meeting of the Wenatchee School District School Board to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And it looks like we do have 2 excused board members tonight. So, small crowd. Esta junta se lleva a cabo en inglés, pero contamos con servicio de traducción si alguien gusta hacer un comentario público o recibir explicaciones en español, por favor, indique su necesidad. We will now begin working through the agenda. Are there any proposed changes or modifications to the agenda?
I have
none. Okay, then we will move on to the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda were sent to the board and posted online last week with a few additions trickling in over the last few days. The board has had the opportunity to review the material and individually ask the superintendent any questions on any item on the agenda. This week's consent agenda includes the minutes from the June 4th, 2024 regular school board meeting, vouchers and payroll, the personnel report, surplus report, contracts, field trips, April financial report, the June enrollment report, 2023-24 highly capable district plan survey, the CTE 4-year plan, the Wenatchee Valley Technical Skills Center 4-year plan, and the summer athletics round 3 event schedules. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second that motion.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We will now move on to citizen comment. If any member of the public would like to make a citizen comment, please sign up online 15 minutes before the meeting or in person. Paper forms are available at the entrance to the meeting hall and can be completed and given to the board secretary, Kim White. Unless translation is required, each comment is limited to 3 minutes, and Ms. White will keep a timer that will notify you when your time expires. Individuals that need translation service will be given 4 minutes to make a comment plus the additional time needed to complete the interpretation. Please be aware that the board is not obligated to respond to questions or challenges made during public comment, and the board's silence will not signal agreement or endorsement of the speaker's remarks. The board appreciates you being here this evening and would like to remind you that all public comments should adhere to the same standard of civility that the board imposes on itself, and that we will exercise the authority to maintain order in a content-neutral manner as needed. With that said, Kim, do we have any comments this evening?
Yes, we do. Our first is Catherine McDonald.
Good evening. My name is Catherine McDonald, and I live in Wenatchee, and I have 3 strong athletic girls. I, along with other parents, have some serious concerns about the need to protect female sports, as well as the recent changes of federal Title IX regulations by the Biden administration. These changes will impact equality, safety, and fairness of our state's educational and athletic opportunities. Congress enacted Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 to ensure equal educational and athletic opportunities for all students regardless of sex. On April 19th, 2024, the Biden administration released new unofficial guidelines for Title IX effective August 1st, 2024. These new regulations redefine the framework of Title IX by expanding the definition of biological sex. Now, sex includes sex stereotypes, sex-related characteristics, sexual orientation, and gender identity. These rule changes are unconstitutional. They erase women and girls, they eliminate due process, and they restrict freedom of speech. And they strip parents of their fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their child. As far as sports, men are on average physically stronger than women. Men have 66% more upper body muscle than women and 50% more lower body muscle. Men have larger hearts and lungs. A larger heart can pump more blood to the body. Larger lungs allow the body's tissues to receive more oxygen. This is just a glimpse of the differences. I have a fact sheet for you if you would like. I've been in contact with several coaches, and one in particular has been coaching track and field over 20 years. The top female shot putter on her team throws an 8.8-pound shot 35 feet. The top male throws 12-pound shot 57 feet. How can people say that the girls just need to work harder and that males have no advantage over females? He could easily pick up that 8.8-pound shot and put it 70 feet. Safety is another concern. Female athletes have been severely injured while competing against biological male athletes. Distorting science doesn't help anyone. It's time to create another league or division for transgender athletes to play sports while protecting biological women in their own sports and spaces. The Kennewick School Board is working on passing a resolution regarding the Title IX revisions made by the Biden administration. I would encourage the Wenatchee School Board to do the same. I've printed out a copy of Kennewick's, as well as a template that Wenatchee can use to follow suit. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want me to just pass those here?
Next, we have TJ Farrell.
Good evening. I am quoting here from Scientific American and the Mayo Clinic on the notion of transgender girls having an unfair advantage. It comes from the idea that testosterone creates physical changes that cause an increase, such as increases in muscle mass. But transgender girls are not the only girls who might have high testosterone levels. An estimated 10% of women have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which results in elevated testosterone levels. Transgender girls on puberty blockers, on the other hand, have negligible testosterone levels. The Olympics have a trans-inclusive policies. They've had them since 2004, but a single openly transgender athlete has yet to even qualify. And why is that? Because their achievements are overshadowed by cisgender athletes who do qualify. So the notion that the Olympics don't know that there's a difference between transgender women and cisgender women and that there's some advantage is ludicrous. Katrina Karkazes, a senior visiting fellow and expert on testosterone and bioethics at Yale University, says, studies of testosterone levels in athletes do not show any clear, consistent relationship between testosterone and athletic performance. Sometimes it's associated with better performance, but other studies show weak links or no links, and yet others show testosterone is associated with worse performance. In fact, according to the Mayo Clinic, male to female transitioners can expect less muscle mass and more body fat all within 3 to 6 months after beginning treatment. Some transgender girls report a loss of energy from transitioning, which greatly affects their activity and athletic performance levels. The trans girls that won races didn't set any records, which you would have expected if they have the sort of advantage that some folks claim that they do. If they had genetic advantage, they would have come close to or broken the girls' record in the races and maybe even challenged the records of the boys' team. That didn't happen. Claims that cisgender girls can't win against transgender girls lack both scientific validity and historical evidence. There is no such thing as a level playing field in sports. Some athletes are gifted in size, muscle mass, agility, exceptional lung capacity, or a host of other attributes. Some have access to a lot of money for trainers, specialists, better equipment, and transportation to training centers. Some have an exceptional capacity for mental toughness to train and compete harder than the rest. We all know 1 or 2 girls in school that were naturally gifted at sports. Some of them were bigger, more muscular or taller, but we didn't exclude them from sports or make them play on the boys' teams. There is no sound argument based on science or history to force transgender students to compete as their gender assigned at birth. There are only parents disappointed in their own kids for not winning, and they sound a lot like the folks who used to say that African-American athletes had an unfair advantage and shouldn't be allowed to compete against white athletes.
Thank you. Next, we have Chelsea Mahuika.
I'm surprised to hear clapping aloud because during COVID, when people were giving public comments, there was no clapping allowed after public comment. So I'd like to keep that fair. But I'm here to thank Corey and those involved in getting the vaping monitors brought to the Wenatchee School District on a broader scale. I have been, as they know, advocating behind the scenes to make that happen. And Corey, I just have to thank you for making the steps to have that happen this school year. So I have talked to countless parents who don't send their kids to Wenatchee High School or put their kids in Running Start as soon as they can because of the vaping problems at Wenatchee High School. And so I really think this is going to be something to start to turn the high school around. I think there's other things that we can do, but this is like honestly going to be a big step forward for our community. There are two other things that, since the topic is being addressed tonight, that I wanted to discuss, and I haven't come prepared as some people, but I have 3 boys and I have 3 girls, and they all play sports. And so I have seen in my own home the major difference between raising a male athlete and a female athlete, which are both talented in their own right and respect, but they are very different. Their body makeup, how they are able to compete, how they are able to endure is different. And it's not a bad difference, but it is a major difference. And I was at a rugby tournament this weekend, and to watch the girls rugby versus the boys rugby, you would never put the girls with the boys rugby players because someone would be severely hurt. There is a definite physical advantage to being a male athlete over a female athlete in those type of athletics. I would advocate for you to please preserve female sports in the Wenatchee School District. I think this is something that both sides of the aisle can agree on. There's obviously some that don't, but I think that this is something that we need to really work to preserve. And I hope that you can do that. And then also just making sure that boys do not use the girls' bathroom and locker rooms like they were allowed to this last school year. Boys that identify as a boy were using the female bathrooms and locker rooms at Wenatchee High School this past school year. And I just advocate for you to continue to preserve female sports and female bathrooms. Thank you.
I have no more signups.
Moving on then to our special presentations.
Excellent. We'll start off today with our Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, Heidi Busk. She'll give us an update on math and ELA data updates. Thanks, Heidi.
All right. I just have to remember to click and click. I think I can do that. Good evening. I'm here tonight to share insights on our students' performance in mathematics and English language arts. As your Director of Learning and Teaching, I have the privilege of working closely with our district and school administrators and teaching staff to analyze data to better understand our students' academic progress and identify areas for improvement. Over the past several years, our district has made significant strides in enhancing the quality of the education we provide. My role involves not only evaluating test scores and assessment results, but also collaborating with administrators and educators to develop and implement strategies that foster student growth and achievement. Tonight, I will present a comprehensive overview of our recent data in both math and ELA, highlighting trends, successes, and opportunities for further development. This data-driven approach enables us to make informed decisions that support our promise to our students and our Big Six outcomes. As with any data review, it takes some time to understand all of the information. You will have time to ask questions tonight after viewing the reading data and also after viewing the math data. But you might also have questions after you have some time to digest the data a bit more. I'm happy to respond as more questions arise. When our administrators, learning improvement teams, and PLCs meet to analyze data, they work through a data protocol with guiding questions to understand the data and determine next steps. This protocol includes looking for celebrations and areas for growth. So tonight, here are some things for you to think about, some guiding questions as you view this data that will help you think about the data a little bit more. What can we celebrate? What is concerning? And how do we compare to the state? Our Big Six outcome number 3 states students will read on grade level by 3rd grade and beyond, and will continue to grow their skills, knowledge, and abilities throughout their education. And we measure that by iReady overall and SBA. We also know that there are other measures along the way that help us know if we're on track to meet our goal. To get a sense of how our students across our district are growing as readers, we will look at grades 3, 5, 8, and 9 reading data from multiple assessments. The data from different assessments is analyzed and used by PLCs, school administrators, and district leadership to improve student learning. The ELA data you will see tonight includes data from multiple sources. Oral reading fluency assessment is one piece of data you'll look at. This has been shown to have a moderate to strong correlation with reading comprehension. We use data from this assessment to pinpoint targeted reading intervention and extension needs for students. You'll also be looking at some common formative assessment data, or CFAs, as we like to call them, which are developed by teachers and aligned to our priority standards. The grade level or content area administers the CFA in the same way at about the same time. These CFAs measure reading comprehension. PLCs use this data to determine best practice instructional strategies and next steps to help students meet or exceed grade level standards. You'll also be looking at iReady reading data, and you're very familiar with that. We look at that quite often, which is an external adaptive assessment that is administered 2 to 3 times a year in grades K through 8. iReady assesses reading, but does not assess writing. Data from iReady provides a benchmark dipstick measure of student progress. This data is especially helpful for grouping students for reading extensions who are on or above grade level in foundational skills. Smarter Balanced Assessment is our final piece of data we'll look at tonight, which is the state-required assessment that assesses not only reading standards, but also writing standards. The ELA assessment for writing asks students to read and answer questions from multiple sources and write to a prompt. They write either an informational, persuasive, or argumentative paper or a narrative story, and must include information from the sources in their text. This is lagging data as the assessment happens at the end of the school year. It gives us longitudinal data for our overall system effectiveness and is part of the measure on the Washington School Improvement Framework. Some of the data you will see tonight is disaggregated by multilingual learners, and you'll see that referenced as ML. And then we disaggregated that with non-ML students, so our ML students and our non-ML students. So you'll see that a lot throughout our presentation tonight. Before we dig into the upper grades, I wanted to share some highlights from our K-2 students. So 75% of our kindergarten students are proficient in foundational reading skills. That means they are fast with their letters and sounds. They can segment words into sounds. They can blend words, blend sounds to make words. They can read those letters. They understand that. This is an increase of 11 percentage points from last year. 65% of our grade 1 students are proficient in foundational reading skills. This is an increase of 3 percentage points from last year. And 63% of grade 2 students are fluent and accurate decoders, demonstrating proficiency with oral reading fluency. This is an increase of 9 percentage points from last year. These results come from the hard work of our educators, our Tier 1 instructional routine based on the science of reading, and a strong system of targeted interventions for students needing additional time and support to reach grade level standards. While we still have work to do, we are seeing more and more students mastering important foundational reading skills each year. So now we're going to start looking at the data. So this is our first set of data, and it focuses on student reading growth from the beginning to the end of the year from iReady. The triangle on the right shows fall data, and the triangle on the left shows end of year data for this year. Green represents students on or above grade level. Yellow represents students who are 1 year behind, and red represents students who are 2 or more years behind. As you can see, we increased the percent of students reading on or above grade level and decreased the percent of students needing intensive interventions in grade 3. The iReady assessment assesses phonology, which is hearing sounds in words, phonics, being able to decode those words, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. If students have already mastered the first 2 foundational skills, their score is based on vocabulary and reading comprehension. The comprehension strand assesses both literary and informational text. The top bar for each set of data represents spring data, and the bottom smaller, lighter bar represents fall data. As we zoom in to see how students are growing in their understanding of what they read, we can see that the percent of students demonstrating grade level comprehension of both literary and informational text increased over the course of this school year. This is represented by that green portion of the bars. As you look at the red portion of the bar, you can see that there is a decrease in the percent of students 2 or more years behind. This is a year-to-year comparison. So it shows this graph shows a year-to-year comparison of the percent of third graders reading on or above grade level in the spring of 2023 and then in the spring of 2024. Keep in mind that this data represents different groups of students who come to third grade with different skills and needs each year. Looking at the data this way helps us think about and make improvements to our instruction. When Tier 1 instruction is effective, we should not see that year to year jumps up and down based on the group of students that come in. When we have solid instruction, we should continue to see that maintain or even go higher. We can look at the percentage of students at grade level the previous year and know this is the mark to improve on. You can see that the percent of students demonstrating grade level oral reading fluency increased significantly. That's those top 2 bars. Remember that oral reading fluency has a moderate to strong correlation with reading comprehension. Notice how close the 23-24 yellow bars for oral reading fluency and iReady are for our non-ML students. iReady data shows that the percentage of students demonstrating mastery of both 2nd grade and 3rd grade standards stayed about the same both years, with a slight decrease for non-ML students and students with disability. This data also shows fewer multilingual learners and special education students are reading on or above grade level. The final 2 bars show the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency on literary and informational common formative assessments, CFAs. This year, we worked with teachers to write, or last year, we worked with teachers to write ELA or reading CFAs and align to our priority standards. And then this year, we're trying them out. We didn't have enough teachers try out no, this grade we did, literary and informational. A different grade, we didn't have enough literary information. But that's the data for that. So let's look at a cohort group. This graph shows the percent of students who demonstrated grade level proficiency with 2nd grade standards and then with 3rd grade standards. This is the same group of students. Looking at the data this way helps us see a group of students and their mastery of grade level standards from year to year. The first set of bars shows the percent of students who were fluent with oral reading fluency based on the 2nd grade benchmark, and then again on the 3rd grade benchmark. It is important to note that the benchmark for the number of correct words read per minute in oral reading fluency increases over the course of the year and then from year to year. So students need to read more words per minute to still stay at grade level. It is also important to note that the rigor of the standards increases at each grade level. So seeing equal bars doesn't mean there was no reading growth for these students. If the bars are equal, it means that the same percent of students were proficient with 2nd grade standards and then showed that the same percent of students were proficient with 3rd grade standards. We can see by this data that there was an increase in the percent of students who demonstrated grade level proficiency in the non-ML group. We see a gap again between the percent of non-ML and ML students demonstrating grade level proficiency in both years. Finally, the last 2 sets of bars show the percent of students with disabilities who demonstrated proficiency in 2nd grade and then the percent in 3rd grade. As you can see, the percent of students demonstrating reading proficiency is larger
in third grade. As we zoom into the cohort reading data from second to third grade a little bit more, we can look at school by school data. We can see the percent of students by school who demonstrated grade level reading proficiency in both second and third grade. In most of the schools, the percentage of students who demonstrated grade level proficiency increased from second grade to third grade. All right, we're moving on to grade 5. Our next set of data focuses on 5th grade. This data shows how students grew as readers during the 23-24 school year. Like third grade, the percent of students reading on or above grade level, green, increased, and the students needing intensive interventions, red, decreased from the beginning to the end of the school year. As we zoom on the data a little bit more, we can see the percent of students demonstrating grade level comprehension of both literary and informational text also increased over the course of this school year. This is represented by the green portion of the bars. This graph shows the year-to-year comparison of the percentage of 5th grade students reading at or above grade level in 23 and then in 2024. Again, keep in mind, this is a different group of students who come with different skills and needs. You can see that the percent of students demonstrating grade level oral reading fluency in grade 5 increased for all students. Again, notice how close the 23-24 yellow bars are for oral reading fluency and iReady non-ML students. We do see that it's not close for our multilingual learners and special education students, which means that we have some work to do in that area of getting that oral reading fluency increased for them, because that really is the passage to comprehension. iReady data shows the percentage of students reading on or above grade level decreased a bit across all groups. This data also shows fewer multilingual learners and special education students are reading on or above grade level. The final bar shows the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency on the informational common formative assessment this year. And we are still in the process of trying those out and tweaking them and revising them. So we don't have enough information on our narrative comprehension CFA for 5th grade this year, but you'll get to see that next year. Let's take a look at cohort data. This graph shows the percent of students who demonstrated proficiency with 4th grade standards and then with 5th grade standards. The first set of bars shows the percent of students who were fluent and accurate readers based on 4th grade benchmark and then on 5th grade benchmark. We see a good increase in the percent of students meeting grade level fluency benchmarks. We can see by this data that there was a decrease in the percent of students demonstrating proficiency on grade level standards from 4th to 5th grade for both ML and non-ML students, but a slight increase in the percent of students with disabilities demonstrating proficiency with grade level standards from 4th to 5th grade. So that happened in 3rd grade and 2nd to 3rd and 4th to 5th. We continue to see gaps in the percent of subgroups of students meeting grade level proficiency. As we zoom into this cohort reading data from 4th to 5th grade, we can again see the percent of students demonstrating grade level proficiency of 5th grade standards decreased slightly from 4th grade at most schools. Let's take a look at how iReady grade 5 data, whoops, you probably want to see it too, compares to our preliminary ELA SBA data. This is preliminary. Please note that the SBA data represents only the students who tested. The final SBA percentage for our district from the state will be adjusted to account for students who did not take the Smarter Balanced Assessment. But you can see that the iReady reading and the preliminary ELA SBA are very close in their results in the percent of students meeting standard. And this is another way to look at our cohort for our SBA over time. We're going to see how they compare to the state over time. So the graph shows how our cohort of 5th grade students compared to the state average achievement level in reading and writing based on the Smarter Balanced English Language Arts Assessment. You can see that our cohort's achievement level is very similar to the state achievement level. And grade 8 for oops, am I on the right spot? I didn't check this one. There we go. Our next set of data focuses on 8th grade. This data shows how students grew as readers in the 23-24 school year. Like 3rd and 5th, the percent of students reading on or above grade level increased and students needing intensive interventions decreased from the beginning to the end of the year. You might notice that the increases and decreases get smaller as we move up the grades. It gets harder and harder to catch students up as they progress through the grade levels. This is why it's imperative to get our students reading at grade level as early as possible so they don't need that catch up in middle school. As we zoom into the data a little more, we can see that the percent of students demonstrating grade level comprehension of both literary and informational texts also increased over the course of this school year. Our year-to-year comparison for grade 8 of students reading on or above grade level. You might notice that there's not an oral reading fluency category. We do assess all students in oral reading fluency in 6th through 8th grades in the fall, just to make sure that they are where they need to be. And then we just continue to teach and assess for oral reading fluency throughout the year for students that are not quite there yet. iReady data shows the percent of students reading on or above grade level decreased slightly for our non-ML groups and quite a bit for our ML group from 7th to 8th grade. The percent of students proficient with grade level standards in 7th and 8th grades stayed the same. The data also shows fewer multilingual learners and special education students are reading on or above grade level. The final 2 sets of bars show the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency on literary and informational common formative assessments in 7th and 8th grade. Again, notice that they're pretty close from our iReady non-ML data and then the percent of students for literary and informational CFAs. And our cohort by school, digging into that school level, grade 7 to 8 iReady reading data, we can see that the percent of students demonstrating grade level proficiency in 8th grade increased slightly from 7th grade at Foothills Middle School and decreased slightly at Orchard and Pioneer. I included Valley's data, but it's hard to compare because their numbers are so much smaller, the end numbers. But I wanted you to have that opportunity to see that also. And then our iReady, our SBA, how our iReady and SBA grade 8 data compare. Please note again that this is preliminary SBA data, but they're very comparable, which tells us that our iReady reading assessment is a pretty good predictor. And they say that it is. They did a big study over the course of a few years, and we can see in our own data that it's a good predictor for us of how students will perform on the Smarter Balance assessment. And finally, this is how our 8th grade cohort compares to the state over time. Moving on to high school, this is our grade 9 English reading on grade level. 9th grade reading data shows the percentage of students who were on or above grade level standard on grade 9 English common formative assessments. They don't take the SBA, and they don't take the SBA. They don't also take the iReady reading assessment. You might notice that across our system from kindergarten to high school, we have an assessment system that uses common formative assessments to frequently monitor student learning and adjust instruction, as well as to provide targeted instruction for students needing additional time and support to reach grade level standard. Because students are not assessed on the 9th grade SBA, we still want to see 9th grade ELA data from more than one data point. Interim assessments are made available to teachers to use as formative assessments throughout the year. They are similar to SBA, but focus in on a narrower set of standards and have fewer questions. 9th grade students took an interim ELA assessment, which is labeled as IAB on the chart. So you can see that right there for all students and then multilingual learners. The bottom two bars show preliminary SBA data for 10th grade SBA. Remember that this preliminary data only shows the results for students who took the assessment, and the results will change for our district when they factor in students who did not take the assessment. The bottom two bars show the gap between MLs and non-MLs is being shored up. So that's a good thing. It appears that 9th grade IAB is a strong predictor of who will meet standard on SBA and supports teachers in identifying which students need additional support. And I'm excited to share this data with you. Let's take a look at our WIDA language assessment data. The WIDA assessment measures students' English proficiency in listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Reading is often assessed through science and math concepts and problems. As you might recall, our professional development this year focused on Wenatchee School District essential instructional strategies, which included getting 100% of students engaged in listening, speaking, reading, and writing in the classrooms. Our WIDA data shows that we greatly increased the number of students who demonstrated English proficiency this year across our system. And as we look at this data, pay particular attention to grades 4 and 5 in this last box. And you can see it in last year's data, but even a huge increase this year of students who exited the program because they proved that they were proficient in English language development based on the WIDA. This year, we've heard in the past, and OSPI heard it also, that we had students who would pass the Smarter Balanced ELA assessment and still not be at that level 4.7 that they needed to be at on the WIDA to exit the program. So OSPI heard what teachers and administrators were saying, and they have a second way that students can exit the program now. So the new exit criteria says that if students earn a score between 4.3 and 4.6, because 4.7 used to be the only measure in grades 2 and up, if they get a score between 4.3 and 4.6 on the WIDA and earn a level 3 or 4 on the ELA SBA, they can also exit ELD services. So this number is going to go up for our number of students who exited, because we are waiting on OSPI to validate that. And then we have many students who met standard but weren't at a 4.7. So we're going to see that number go up in the students that exited this year. So that was a lot of data. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some summaries and takeaways. As I was putting this data together and reflecting with administrators and teachers, takeaways: students are growing as readers across our system because of our evidence-based literacy instruction and PLC work. We see gaps between our multilingual learners and our non-multilingual learners. We see that our proficiency levels are not where they should be yet. Students with disabilities are demonstrating response to instruction intervention. We have a system of common formative assessments that monitors student progress frequently and provides information to teachers for which students need more time and support or extensions. And in WIDA, we had an increase in our exited students, especially with our elementary students. Our professional development data guides what we do. So we know we need to continue with improving Tier 1 first best core instruction and continue supporting PLCs with systems for intervention and extensions. Questions for the reading portion or celebrations?
I always have a lot. Thank you for the data.
It's a lot, and we're not finished yet.
So help me understand, with the WIDA exited students, those are counted as multilingual in the SBA and iReady, because they
Not
were
if
still identified as multilingual when they took the iReady
That's a
and
great
the
question.
SBA.
That's a really good question. They exited earlier than they took, their data came in earlier. So I don't know if they would be counted as MLs or not. So I will check into that for you. That's a great question.
And I mean, I'm pretty sure you know where I'm going with this. It's great that you're showing us that the district is showing us the data. It's still not pretty to look at.
Mhm.
And I appreciate you pointing out that we're not where we need to be with the multi-language learners. But what are we doing about it? Because this is something that has been persistent to the district.
Yeah.
And we can go beyond we can go to our low socioeconomic students.
Mhm.
We are seeing increases with special education, which is fabulous. We've
Mhm.
seen a change in models in
Yeah.
regards to special education. So we can definitely celebrate those.
Yeah.
The reality is that with the district with a large number of multilingual learners, low socioeconomic students, et cetera, I mean, great, we're identifying them, but what are we identifying?
Yeah.
What are we doing that's actually making an impact? 'Cause
That is wonderful. I'm glad you asked it.
I'm just tired of seeing the same numbers lagging, and our non-ML are growing,
Mhm.
but the achievement gap is not closing. And that's what's so frustrating for me to see year after year after year.
Mhm.
We have different strategies, but that gap continues to get larger.
Yes.
So
So,
thank you for
yes.
presenting it, but
Yeah. So I'm so glad you asked that, because last year was our first year of really focusing on instructional strategies that are essential for our multilingual learners. And we did a workshop on it and we talked about that. And so our district trainers have provided professional development to our administrators and our teachers. As we walk around, we're seeing a couple things. We're seeing teachers implementing strategies, but we're still seeing students who are not talking in the classroom yet. And the strategies are to get kids talking. So we don't abandon that strategy and that practice after 1 year. It's just in the beginning phases. And this year, our professional development will continue to focus on giving teachers more strategies and structures to help get the kids talking, because if they're not saying it, they're not learning it. So we aren't seeing the student to student talk as much as we want to. The good news is we're starting to see teachers providing time for it, but wondering, how do I get my kids to talk? So the professional development we're doing this year, and I would encourage you guys to come be part of our professional development in August, is really helping to move that forward. So we're starting to see pockets of that happening. And we know that we were in the beginning phases, and now we're in the getting more refined. We're trying to get more refined on those strategies to now see the student talk piece. So that is something that we are doing, continuing to focus on, because we will see the results when we start to get those students talking. Again, we're also continuing the work on our PLCs and looking at student data. Something we saw this year, and I didn't break down CFA data by ML and non-ML, but our teachers talk about that every time they look at the results of a CFA. So they know who their students are. They sort by who our multilingual learners are, who are not, and they're getting interventions. We're stronger in the foundational skills piece. We're not as strong when it comes to comprehension, because that vocabulary piece is a big piece of that comprehension too. So that's one of our essential strategies, is vocabulary instruction with academic vocabulary. So thank you for asking. We don't like to see the gap either, because every student needs to be able to demonstrate grade level standards or beyond. And that's what we say, right? So they're ready, and we are working towards that. But that's an excellent question, and we're working on it every day, every year.
well, I appreciate you being so kind. It's just, we have a lot of work to do.
We do.
And, to see that gap widening and widening, it's not good.
Yeah. One of the things to think about, Maria, and this, we're going to talk a long time tonight. One of the things to think about is when we look at our 4th and 5th grade students and beyond, the old model, and I know we did this, we used to, and now last year, our multilingual learners their opportunity for intervention was either reading intervention or language support. They didn't get both. And that model doesn't happen anymore. So those students went through our system when they didn't get that opportunity to have that early intervention in reading. So as we look at these upper grades, I see, yeah, there's a gap because they didn't get it here. So now we're trying to fill that in and have grade level comprehension standards. So, yeah.
That's all I'll say for now.
Okay.
I have pretty much the same comments as Maria. It is concerning to see that gap.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of data. I appreciate it. And I appreciate having at least two groups or more than two groups, but two critical groups for me, where you're looking at the differences and we need to follow up on it. Perhaps we can learn, attend more, listen in
Yeah.
more this year. But where I was going was just something I'd like to look at. It seems that the gaps are worse as you go up the education system. The pre-3 gaps are a little less severe than the 3, than the 5, than the 8.
Mhm.
I don't want to grab false hopes. Do you see anything in that? I would think the pre-grade 3s perhaps are less hurt by the pandemic. Do you see that's speculative?
Yeah.
Work, not false hopes. But I just wonder if you see anything in the short term that encourages you.
Yeah. With our K3, is that what you're asking? Yeah. Yeah, we're not seeing the big gaps. We're not seeing the big gaps. And in classrooms who are really implementing those strategies and a few other strategies one other strategy that hasn't been rolled out across the whole system, but some teachers are using it. We see in some cases in first grade, almost 100% of students in a school, in a grade level, in a classroom, pockets of excellence right now, meeting standard, mastering foundational skills. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. So we just need to get that and share that along. That's what data does for us. It tells us where is it working and how can we replicate that in other places. So we're seeing it. We're seeing positive across our system, but in zooming in to places where this is the system that we need, this is the instruction, and this is what it should look like in every classroom.
Do you see any difference between an Anglophone and a bilingual Spanish, English in terms of adaptation to the science of reading as we're teaching it?
Can you repeat that, please, for me?
Do you see any difference in the
Oh.
take-up of structured literacy between two languages? Or people who use two languages versus one?
Oh, like for instance, our dual language school. Or
Just mean generally, because
generally.
sometimes people will say that the science is constructed more for English, less for Spanish. Even if you're learning in English, you may be influenced by Spanish comprehension in various ways. Do you scientifically, educationally see any differences and barriers in the techniques that are being used?
When we're instructing in English, one of the things that we're seeing in our foundational skills instruction is that we need to tweak the research-based program that we're using to stop and talk about the meaning of those little words along the way. So that is one thing that one of the schools said, we're really doing this effectively. They are like top-notch, following systematic sequential instructional literacy routine for foundational skills. But they said our multilingual learners aren't growing as much and they're getting that same instruction. So why not? So what they determined and they tried out was we're going to make sure that our students understand the vocabulary. Like when we're segmenting dog, we're going to have a picture of a dog just so that they have that, because when they have that understanding of the word, it makes more sense. So that was one thing that they noticed just in action research, what they're doing. I think that the vocabulary piece has a lot to do with it, but students are segmenting RWSD instructional strategies for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, if we are using those and using those consistently and effectively, kids learn the vocabulary along the way also, because it's part of the instruction that we do. But I do think that the language makes it a little bit harder unless we understand the needs of the learners that we have. Great question.
One more one. It's not a question. So one thing that you mentioned multiple times, that we don't really talk too much about is the impact that students that don't take the SBA has on
Mhm.
the district our overall score.
Yeah.
So what is well, I guess it is a question. How are we attacking that? Because if you have a large number of students or a number of students that don't take the SBA, it's obviously reflected in our scores, which brings down overall
It does.
our district score, which is what the public sees, right?
Yeah.
But we need to fill in those gaps as to identifying why those students are taking it. What are we doing as an approach? And I'm assuming as students get older, we have a little bit more of a challenge getting them.
Yeah, we do. It's definitely something that we need to talk about as a district and address, make some plans. Yeah.
And it's going to be education to our families of the importance of the Smarter Balanced Assessment and the impacts that it can have on their student. It also, we need to educate our families on the impacts of what it has on their graduation requirements and making it through all of those high school expectations. So it's all about education. We can do that.
Mhm.
I will just add one thing I learned is that the students who qualify for Running Start in those programs are able to opt out of the SBA. So that was, yeah.
Oh, I don't know that for sure. I think it's that no, they can't.
There is still an expectation that everyone sits for that SBA. At least
It's a
once.
requirement.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think a lot of them do choose not to.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's
Somehow-
another thing we need to work on, right?
Yeah, yes, because I was presented with the waiver of, hey, mom, can you waive this for me after
Mhm.
taking the first day? So there's the rumors and gossip going around the school that you can opt out of that. So
Well, the state doesn't say we can opt out, so yeah. Have to work on that one. Thank you. All right, are you ready to move on to math? Okay, let's do it. Oops. Okay, Big Six outcome number 4 reads that students will be on grade level or above or beyond by 8th grade in algebra as measured by iReady overall and SBA. To get a sense of how our students across our district are growing in their math skills, we'll look again at 3, 5, 8, and 9 math data from multiple assessments, including common formative assessments. We have them for ELA and math. And actually at the elementary level, we've had the math assessments. We started those first. And so we've had time to administer them, see how students do, revise them. Then the next year we did it again. So this year they took a revised version. And then the teachers then got together and revised them again based on what they saw and the data that it provided. iReady Math again, and we know what that's about. We do know that on iReady Math, it assesses different domains. So it assesses number and operations, algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. We'll look at overall data for these domains and dig in deeper to the data around our priority standards that are mostly in the number and operations and algebraic thinking strands. And then we'll also look at some smarter balance data. Again, keep in your mind, what can we celebrate? What is concerning? And how do we compare to the state? And we'll start with 3rd grade again. This is our overall grade 3 iReady math data that shows that students came in and there were only 11% of students at grade level. There was a summer dip and not solid on some skills yet. And they increased to 40% of students at grade level at the end of the year. They also dramatically decreased from 42% to 17%, the students that were needed intensive interventions to reach grade level standards. So we know that I-Ready assessment assesses all of those, but we're going to dig into these two strands because this is where the majority of our priority standards lie. So number and operations, which includes place value, conceptual understanding and computation, and decimal and fractions. I've got an itchy nose. Algebraic thinking, which includes problem solving, computational fluency, and equations. And then we are not going to dig into geometry and data and modeling this round. The majority of our priority standards are in the number and operations and algebraic thinking domains, so we will zoom into these two domains. We can see that our third grade students demonstrated significant growth in both number and operations and algebraic thinking over the course of this year. Our year-to-year comparison shows the percent of students meeting standard in spring of grade 3, and then a different group of students meeting standard in the spring of 24. We can see that the percent of non-ML and ML students meeting standard each year stayed about the same in 23 and 24. We do see an increase in the percent of students with disabilities meeting both second grade standards in 23 and third grade standards in 24. And when we look at the comparison between the percent of students demonstrating grade level proficiency with our priority standards, a smaller percentage of students were proficient in number and operation standards in third grade than in second grade. And about the same percentage were proficient in third grade algebraic thinking standards than second grade. The bottom two bars represent the percent of students who demonstrated grade level or above proficiency on this year's math CFAs. One of the things to know, and we'll talk about it more later, is there are certain years in math that are more of a build on the concepts and skills you know, and then get better at those. And there are certain years where they pop in a lot of new skills. So grade 3 is one of those years where students in K2 have been working on addition and subtraction and really getting good at addition and subtraction. And then in grade 3, we add in multiplication and division, concepts, understanding, and fluency with basic facts. And we also add in fractions. So understanding fractions as numbers. Up until grade 3, they've seen fractions as on a pie, and they cut the pie, or in fourths in a box. And third grade is the year when they start to really understand fractions as numbers on a number line. And then they do work with comparing and equivalent fractions. So big jump between second and third grade mastery of standards. And so I just want you to be aware of that. Third grade is one of those years. Grade 2 to 3 cohort data shows the percent of non-ML students demonstrating grade level proficiency decreased from second to third grade, but multilingual and special education groups had the same percent of students meeting both grade 4 and 5 standards, with the gap for multilingual learners and special education students continuing in math. The bottom two sets of bars show the percent of students who demonstrated proficiency with second grade standards and third grade standards in number and operations and algebraic thinking. Which brings multiplication. We see a slight decrease in the percent for number and operations because it brings in those things we talked about, multiplication and division concepts and fraction understanding. We do see an increase in the percent of students demonstrating grade level proficiency from second to third in algebraic thinking. And the thing about that in third grade is that the big focus of algebraic thinking has been in K1, 2, 3 on problem solving, and then writing equations to match the problem, which is much more difficult than it sounds. But so third grade, their algebraic content standards didn't change a lot. It refined and got deeper into problem solving with larger numbers. And with it makes me wonder if that's why we saw a percentage increase there. one of our essential strategies this year that we provided professional development on for math was our problem-solving language routine, which might have led to an increase in the students demonstrating proficiency in the problem-solving area. Zooming into the iReady strands that address our priority standards, this data shows a decrease. Whoops, did I get to the wrong one? Hang on. All right, we did that. Okay, we're ready to go on. There we go. Zooming into the iReady strands that address our priority standards, number and operations, the data shows a decrease in the percent of students meeting grade level standard in the number and operations strand as reflected by the overall district data. A list of grade level skills for each grade is listed in the boxes. So you can see the increase in the standards. And when something is brand new, sometimes it takes some students longer to master than others. And so the way our standards are written is we introduce it in 1 year and learn it conceptually, and then we practice it in the next year. And then the next year is where that standard says you need to be fluent or master this certain skill or concept because we're moving on. So a lot of new was in grade 3 in number and operations. When we look at the algebraic thinking strand and we see school by school again, we increased from 2nd to 3rd grade in almost all schools, the percentage of students meeting standard. And then again, notice how the skills change from 2nd to 3rd. It's pretty much the same, just with larger numbers. Okay. And then we move on to grade 5. And overall, grade 5 iReady math data shows an increase in the percent of students who are on or above standard and a significant decrease in the percent of students needing intensive interventions in math. And as we zoom in on those 2 strands over the course of a year, we can see really good growth from 20% to 49% over the course of the year in numbers and operations. And in algebraic thinking from 17% to 39%. So within the year, students are growing their skills. Our year-to-year comparison shows the percent of students demonstrating proficiency with grade level standards in 23 and 24 on both the iReady assessment as well as grade 5 common formative assessments. A reminder, this is different groups of students. We again see the gap for our multilingual learners and special education students. The bottom 2 bars show us that the percent of students proficient on grade level standards decreased from 4th grade standards to 5th grade standards. Again, this helps us focus our math professional development for teachers in this area, and we'll dig in to see how those standards, those 2 domains change between 4th and 5th grade. So this is our cohort grade 4 to 5. So we see a decrease in our non-ML percent of students meeting grade level standard for our non-ML, our iReady. I think we already looked at that one. Our number and operations and iReady algebraic thinking. There we go. Now we'll dig into the number and operations strand further. Notice the new skills and concepts that are addressed in grade 5. So through grade 4, they are now seeing addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, more work with fractions, comparing, adding, subtracting, multiplying fractions, decimal fractions, and fraction word problems. In grade 5, in number and operations, they dig more deeply into dividing decimals. And this is the first year in grade 5 where they start to learn about decimal place value. And then they do operations with decimals. So there's a lot of concept building in there. And iReady doesn't, I don't feel that it gives students as much opportunity to show their conceptual understanding on this on decimal place value. It's really a foundational year for them. As I shared earlier, we often see this dip when there are new, more complex concepts and skills introduced at a grade level. So when we look at algebraic thinking, again, we see that dip. But what happens in fifth grade is something they've never seen before. So in fifth grade, they're evaluating expressions and equations. They're learning about order of operations and ordered pairs. That's all there is in the algebraic thinking standards for fifth grade. So it's completely brand new concepts for them to learn about in fifth grade. And they did grow. You saw growing over the year, but we're seeing that dip in the percent of students mastering that from grade to grade there. Here's how our iReady math compares to the preliminary SBA. And here's how we compare SBA to the state. Grade 8, we still see a growth in our green, but it's not as much as we get into those upper grades. It's harder to catch kids up when they don't come in with the skills they need to start with. And then a small increase in our students who need additional time and support. We're seeing growth in our number and operations strand and our algebraic thinking strand. And our year-to-year comparison for grade 8 iReady math subgroups. Remember, this is not the same group of students. We see an increase in the percent of students demonstrating proficiency of grade level standards for non-ML students and a significant gap with our subgroups. We also see a decrease in the percent of students demonstrating proficiency in number and operations and algebraic thinking. And again, those standards change. Our grade 8 iReady algebra and algebraic thinking, we saw a tremendous increase in the percent of students demonstrating mastery of grade level standards over the course of the year. This is a huge celebration. This might be due to our priority standards being heavily aligned to the algebraic thinking, and PLCs engage in cycles of continuous improvement, and Tier 1 instruction focus also on academic vocabulary for math. Grade 7 to 8 cohort data shows that the percent of students meeting grade level standards increased at Foothills and Pioneer from 7th to 8th grade, and the percent of students meeting both 7th and 8th grade standards stayed the same at Orchard. Again, it's hard to compare Valley due to those small numbers. This graph represents the percent of students demonstrating proficiency or above in proportional reasoning on grade 8 CFAs. The standard on this CFA falls under the algebraic thinking domain on iReady. We see the percent of students meeting standard on the CFA is similar across all 3 schools. And this graph represents the percent of students demonstrating proficiency or above on Pythagorean theorem on grade 8 CFAs by school. And this would also fall under the algebraic thinking strand of iReady. This is where, when we look at this data, and you're probably wondering, why is one school's bar so much higher than the others? And we wonder, and as a system, we wonder, so did they do something differently? Teams talk about that. Or are we all administering the CFA the same way? Are we using some allowing notes and some not allowing notes? We have common administration agreements in K through 8 for our CFAs, but are we all following them? Do we need to look at them again? So that's another question we wonder. Or maybe, the rigor of the assessment is like different. Maybe we need to look at that and see, are we all teaching to the rigor of the assessment and teaching that standard rigor or above the proficiency? So a lot of questions happen when we have data that looks so different. Here's how grade 8 compared. I didn't put the numbers on there, I'm sorry. iReady math and preliminary math SBA. And here's how our 8th graders compare to the state. And now we're going to look at high school algebra. Algebra 1, this is CFA data for ninth grade because they don't take the SBA. The graph represents the percent proficient or above on Algebra 1. Green is proficient, blue is above. When I look at this data, it makes me wonder a couple things, like, do we have the rigor of the standard? Are we really, does our CFA reflect the rigor of the standard? And do we have common scoring agreements for this standard? So here are our math takeaways. We see a trend of within the year growth according to iReady, an increase of learning results with students with IEPs. We see gaps between our multilingual and non-multilingual learners and special students with disabilities. We see our proficiency levels are still not where we want them to be. Because we guarantee these standards, we should see our students meeting these standards. There's a system of common formative assessments, again, that monitor student progress frequently and provide information to teachers for which students need additional time and support. WIDA growth is showing great increase, especially at the elementary, and WIDA assesses reading through math story problems, word problems. So that's an interesting concept that we learned about WIDA. Data dips in years where new and more complex concepts are being taught. We tend to see that. And significant growth in iReady algebraic thinking domain in 8th grade might be attributed to the work of math PLCs, we wonder. And then professional development, kind of as we look at data, we think about how are we going to help this be better? We need to continue focusing on Tier 1 first best core instruction in math and time and support for students, not yet at standard. We don't at elementary level across our system have an intervention system for math like we have for reading at all buildings yet. So that's a grow for us. PD strategies to teach fractions and decimal operations in grade 3-5. We see that as a need. And we see that more opportunities for students. We need to provide more opportunities for students to engage in the use of IABs that are directly aligned to the Smarter Balanced Assessment. All right. Before I stop for questions, this just kind of talks about what are some next steps for us. So we will continue professional development of WSD essential strategies that are essential for our multilingual learners and excellent for all learners, which includes structured student talk, academic discussions, academic vocabulary, and academic language, and also supporting structured reading and writing. Because remember, the SBA assesses not only reading skills, but also that high demand writing, on-demand writing, which is rigorous. And I'd love to share more about what students can do in that area. And then ongoing leadership, professional learning, and team data reviews. Our leadership team looks at data, looks at CFA data, talks about CFA data, and we'll continue to do that on a regular basis. And then support PLCs and guaranteed and viable curriculum. Oops. All right, I'm ready. Thanks for hanging in there with me.
It was well worthwhile, and it's similar food for thought, similar patterns, similar long-term work. Thank you
Yep.
very much, and to your people.
Thank you.
One of the questions I have is, it's disappointing to see the what looks like a decline in year to year, especially in the math. I mean, 23 looks so much stronger than 24. And you're explaining in terms of we're adding new skills to these third graders that they didn't see in second grade. Are we picking the best places then to be measuring students? Would it be better to measure them in like fourth or sixth grade if there's not as many new skills taught? Because if we're if that is the reason for the skew of the data, how do we develop a strategy to help that?
And we do have data for every grade level. We just picked certain ones, or I would be here for days sharing it with you, but I can definitely share more data with you. But yeah, it almost seems like the way that, especially the math, the way the standards are built, second grade would be a great way to say, check in on like, are they proficient with addition and subtraction and problem solving with the basic facts and numbers within 100? Because that's a year. Then third grade, it changes. And then fourth grade might be a better year. So look, next time we might look at second and fourth and see what we see there. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe in terms of comparing third to fourth grade, did
Oh, yeah.
they, I mean, yeah, maybe first to second grade would work as well. Are they on track for?
Yeah.
But
But
when you have
maybe
the new
two
skills
grades that are closer in
right,
skills.
that's what
a
I'm
good
thinking,
idea.
because if that's the explanation, it's hard to know, are they or are they not? I mean,
know.
it's super disappointing to look at from the data because you want to see, we've put all this work in and you want to see the
I know.
progression year to year. And so to look at that,
Yeah.
it's what are we not doing? What's going backwards? I
Yeah.
mean, at all levels, we have things to work on clearly, but
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea. And one of the things that was like a bright spot at the beginning of the school year is the sixth grade math teachers said, I don't know what you're doing, but these kids are coming in stronger in their math understanding than we have seen in a long time. So it might not show every year in this iReady, the way that we are assessing iReady, but what kids are coming in with and their depth and understanding of fractions has improved. And we haven't even targeted professional development for teachers on fractions yet. But one of the things that happens with math in elementary school, especially, is our teachers have had years of reading professional development, years, and some writing too. And then with our structured literacy and the science of reading, again, a lot. But what has happened traditionally in math professional development is we adopt a program and they come in and teach us how to use the program. And that's it. And so I'm passionate about not letting that happen anymore because our teachers deserve to have the most knowledge like they do with science of reading in math instruction. And so we're really working on that in many different ways. So I know that when that work continues and the more we build our knowledge of our big people, the more we can develop the knowledge of our little people. So we need to make sure we continue to do that. But they just haven't had the opportunities to grow professionally in math as much over the course of years in elementary as they have in literacy. So we're gonna help that. We're gonna give them more opportunities for that. Okay.
My comments are the same. I mean,
I know.
what about reading, I mean,
Yeah.
there's transfer over to math.
Yeah. All right. Well, you hung in there. That was a lot of data. I had 56 slides and you saw them all. So thank you so much. And please attend our professional development. Come and see what we're learning in August. I think it might be really insightful for you, or we'll come to a workshop with you again. So thank you.
thank you. Next up is the special presentation for the consolidation and budget reduction update.
Excellent. Heidi, thank you so much for the data and the work that you and your team are doing. And we're excited to hear how that work and professional development helps us next year as well. So thank you. Good evening, Board of Directors, and thank you for the time this evening. This is our final board meeting for the 23-24 school year. So wow, that went amazingly fast. And tonight I plan on sharing with you an update to the consolidation planning on the closure of Columbia Elementary and our budget update. So there's lots of different topics here that we'll be moving through, and I'm going to try to do that succinctly with my notes and on the screen for everyone. So first off, I want to share the information on what we've been up to since our May 14th decision. And we begin with the continuation of our transition planning. As you are very well in the know of, we were planning for 2 different scenarios this year, one with the possible closure of Columbia Elementary and one with possibly not closing Columbia Elementary. So we are continuing that transitioning planning throughout much of the spring, actually late winter and spring. With that work came additional mailings to families describing the pertinent information once that decision was made. And then, so we had a mailing that came out immediately following the decision, and one that came right after school was out, which a letter from potentially their new principal. So if the students went to Lincoln, they got a letter from their current principal, Cy Stuber. And then if they went to Washington, they got a letter from their new principal, Jessica Bright. We also had, there's been a lot of orchestration around the staff packing and moving planning, moving a lot of people in our system in a short period of time. So we've been working on that, the logistical side of things, the actual moving side of things, which is happening this week as we speak. Maybe not as I speak, but it was happening during the day today. And I checked in with our director of maintenance and operation, Brian Brocky, and he said things are moving swiftly and efficiently, and everything's going well. However, as you move things around, you uncover other items that present themselves. So it's going smoothly as could be. We also had our open house. Open house information planning was much earlier this year and planned in advance with additional information and planning to support our new students and where they will be going. We also had additional planning that was taking place with all of our departments and our teaching specialists. So we had planning with our nutrition services, our custodial services, our maintenance and operation teams, and then the teaching specialists of library, art, music, and fitness. Some of the work that our transition teams were working on as well. I'll just put them up here. We had our logistical planning with increased students. And so everything from supervision to intervention to recess, et cetera. So lots of different things that those groups are looking at and planning for. One of the things that we may not think about a lot, but our building administrators is what are the parking lot routines for efficiency? And how do we not slow down the process of dropping off and picking up our children and making sure that safety is accounted for? The other pieces as well as nutrition services. What does food service look like? What does the timing look like with an increased number of students in your building? And those are very unique challenges that Lincoln and Washington are working on as well. We also have some schools that will have transition to kindergarten or TK for the first time. And so they're working on planning for the space for the children, also working on the flow and the movement of the students throughout the building, planning for the specialist schedules, making sure that each of those TK students has access to art and music and fitness, as well as their other courses. So making sure that they're in the rotation of the specialist schedules. And then ensuring that we have curriculum and we have furniture for 4-year-olds that needs to be addressed in a timely fashion. So we have one new additional classroom that's at Mission View, and then we have a new classroom at Washington and a new classroom at Newberry this year. Other things that are happening is working really well to make sure that the information to our families is getting out, and we're accessing obviously the mailings that I talked about. We're leveraging radio, which we will continue to work on throughout the summer and as we move toward the beginning of the school year. And we're also transitioning to Parent Square. As many of you know in the system, we've had some challenges with our Blooms, our shift to Blooms this year, and we're moving to Parent Square, which is a program that Purchase Remind. So we're excited about that transition and our communication protocols and increasing that communication with our parents and families. And then, as always, utilizing our website as best we can and adding the cool little pop-up feature that Diana puts in there for us. So thanks, Diana. Love that. Let's see here. Additional support. So how are we intentionally supporting all of our students as these shifts are being made is a hugely important question, and making sure that the correct resources are following the students. And as we talked about in the late winter and in the spring, we know that our students with IEPs and with disabilities will have their support following them, as well as our special program, migrant and bilingual students. And so we know that that is happening. And here are a few other extra resources that are going to be provided to help students transition to their new schools. At Washington, we will see the intervention shifts, which we talked about in the written analysis and also followed up with in the addendum to the written analysis. And we also have some increases in our library books. So literacy, language access, and diversity through bilingual editions. So there were many books at Columbia that will now move to Lincoln Elementary and will also move to Washington Elementary. We have also increased from a half-time family advocate to a full-time advocate at Washington Elementary, which we're excited about, to help increase bilingual support and access for parents and families as they come into the building and need to understand what is happening and get directions on how to support their students in the building. In addition, we have TK planning and classroom preparation at Washington. And then we have the potential addition of student support specialist time. We have a grant funding through our Stronger Connections grant to have 8 student support specialists in our elementary schools. And we know that with the closure of Columbia, that would leave an additional SSS is what we call them. So I'm trying to use the language of the student support specialist, but we would have an additional SSS. And so some of that time we're working on having that land at Washington Elementary and also support the other SSSs as well. And at Lincoln, some of the extra resources, again, the same few at Washington there with our intervention specialist shifts, and then the additional library resources. They are also adding additional staffing through their high poverty funds. They have dollars that are given to them for the level of socioeconomic status students that they have in their building. So they'll have an additional counseling resource there as well. And then we're looking at, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail, we're looking at busing for Lincoln students that are in the Lincoln section of the Columbia boundary as well. And I'll explain a little bit more about that when I move into the Safe Routes to Schools part of our presentation today. And I have to catch up here. Okay, first part of today's presentation, that's the first section there. So wondering if you might have any questions or clarifications that I can address at this time. Okay. Let's keep on rolling. As we get into the Safe Routes to School, in our collaboration with the City of Wenatchee, law enforcement, and the Traffic Safety Commission, these are some of the things that we're working with our schools. Lincoln, obviously working on grappling with the walking issue and the Ferry Street kind of debacle. We are also working on the short and long-term goals of what that looks like and making sure that the area around Ferry Street is adequately addressed as a school zone, because right now that we know that it could be better. And then also working on busing for those students. Because of this work, we still have concerns about the short-term goals versus the long-term goals of that Ferry Street crossing. And we're working on bus routes for the students of the Columbia boundary who will be going to Lincoln. And I'll explain a little bit more about what the difference is between those short-term goals and the long-term goals and what we're hoping for and what we don't think that we'll be able to get right away as soon as we would like to see that. Washington, we're working on the safest routes for students to get to school walking. We know that Washington has a large parent drop off and pickup. And so we're working on those logistics. Also playing with a little bit of bus drop off and pickup. We know that there are 3 buses that come to Washington and they have an amazing access for bus ramp pickup and drop off. So we're looking at how that coordination works as well. So just a few things that impact the safe routes to school. Okay. So here's some of the short-term items that we're looking at in collaboration again with the City of Wenatchee Law Enforcement and the Traffic Safety Commission. We've identified some short-term goals that we would like to see happen. One of those is extending the no parking zone on either side of the street at Ferry Street to increase that visibility for students. So when cars are coming up that hill, then they can see the line of sight a lot further so that students are easily identified. We know there are some students that are crossing that street already. And so no matter what, we know that there will be students crossing regardless of busing routes or whatever it is that the district puts into place. So we want to make sure that these short-term gains are done as soon as possible to protect the safety of those students. We also have we want to add some school zone signage in that area and make sure that we increase the knowledge and understanding of our community members and our families and just the general commuter that this is a school zone and we need to be aware of that. Also working to extend that school zone signage from for the walkers all the way from our Lincoln zone to Pioneer. So having that stretch all the way up Ferry Street as it turns into Russell Street as well. So we're excited about that prospect because we do know that we have some students that will walk that entire continuum. And then the younger students will go to Lincoln and the older students will walk to Pioneer Middle School. And then the even older students will walk then to Wenatchee High School. So making sure that we're working on addressing all of those. We've also discussed extending the merge lane to turn onto the Okanagan Street so that is not as abrupt as it has been or it is right now. So we'll be looking at extending that. And the nice thing about that is they can extend that with just some paint. So that will be helpful for us in the short-term goal. We also have asked that there be some road signage painted on the street. So as we have some crosswalk identified areas, but actually have signage on the street that says student crossing. And when you see that in some of the more metropolitan areas, it's very large and you can see that very well, super identifiable. And then finally on the short term is we're looking to have potentially some movable signage where you might have all sorts of little yellow people and they have some signage and you can see that downtown a little bit. And we'd like to work on some of those things. Those are all things that we can address in the short term to help our students who are already crossing and the students who may also be crossing, even if we are busing students from that area. We know that some students will still be walking. So the other part of it though is the long-term goals, and the long-term goals we're excited about, but they're not going to be here right away. And we know that because of the way the grant process works. But I think that as we're learning more about it, we just want to make sure that those long-term goals are things that we want for our walkers in the future. And we want to make sure that their safety is paramount. So as we work with the city, we're learning that the city's 3 E's, right? How do we combine engineering, education, and enforcement to create safe routes to schools? And so our long-term goals are to improve safety for students throughout the district. And one of the things that is a byproduct of the work that has happened on this transition plan is that this collaboration between the city and the Traffic Safety Commission and the school district is we're actually auditing the entire Safe Routes to School program and not just those that impact Lincoln and Washington because of Columbia's closure. So this will be an ongoing process that I am really excited about. And so we're going to improve the safety for students throughout the district, but long-term, we do want to improve the safety for that Ferry Street area. The city of Wenatchee is collaborating with us on their priority list. They had a priority list before the conversation about closing Columbia happened. And so they've allowed us to work with them and identify additional priorities. And then how we've kind of rearranged what those priorities are looking like and how we can go after some grant funding to address these items in the future. So there is grant funding that is specifically for the city of Wenatchee that they will be going after. And then there is grant funding that is available through the Traffic Safety Commission that the Wenatchee School District will be going after to continue our long-term plans with safe routes to schools. And the grant funding from the Traffic Safety Commission will allow dollars to help facilitate data collection for the city and the school district. So we will be able to understand where we have more dangerous patterns with traffic safety in the future. It will also help us create school zone beacons for Ferry Street or other identifiable crossing areas. And finally, it will help with bulb outs. This is new language for me. And obviously we know what bulb outs are, but very common in the vernacular when we talk about this, the engineering side of this work. They can paint in a short term, they can paint bulb outs, but obviously they're not as impactful as the real physical bulb outs that we would like to see in the future. And so because of some of these items being too far in the horizon, we've decided to bus our students in the Lincoln section of the former Columbia boundary until we can get some of these more long-term items taken care of in the near future, just for the safety of our students. Okay, and I have education and enforcement, and so we'll just run through this section here. For the education side of things, we still plan to have a communication plan for our parents, our students, and our families. We are going to leverage radio announcements on various stations so that we can give some public service announcements to help as part of the city and the school district and the traffic unit in helping safe routes to schools for our students. We'll leverage social media announcements, working with partnerships with local agencies. We also have we're also working on some pop-up tents and some publicity and how we can really help our community know and understand when school begins, we're going to need them to help us in these certain high traffic areas. We also want to partner with our parent volunteers because the more adults that we have at some of these crossings, the better. And there's a program called Target Zero, which hopes to end traffic fatalities by 2030. And they are looking at building programs in our secondary schools in the area. So that was one thing that came out of this work, is our understanding of Target Zero. Okay, with law enforcement, we will look forward to having dedicated officers on site, and those are not just our SROs. Those are going to be some of our traffic unit as well, and some other dedicated officers that will help during the beginning of the school year. There will be a law enforcement social media push, and law enforcement is very excited about the presence they have on social media and the community ability to get that information out. We'll also have law enforcement presence before and after school for an increased period of time, and that will be mostly our SRO officers that will be working with that. And then looking forward to creating additional opportunities for other information to be shared. And the traffic safety unit are basically there ready for a full press to have the community slow down. So that's exciting information for us to work with. And that's kind of the update on the 3 E's there around safe routes to schools. Any questions or clarifications that I can share with you or write down and bring back to you?
Just a quick question. Have parents started receiving information about the potential bus route? And how are we going to know if that's going to be widely used versus the walking?
Yes, parents have, thank you, a great question. Parents have received information about that, and we are planning at this point for it to be widely used until we hear otherwise. Or see otherwise. It might be who shows up at the time. But yeah, thank you. Good question. Yeah, Maria?
It just made me think of Safe Routes to School campaign, similar to what, I know there's cost involved, but similar to what the PUD is doing about the bike lane or the trail.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's catchy. It's out there. Again, funding permitted.
Absolutely.
Time.
Yes. Well, and that's one thing that we're realizing, though, to your point, is there can be more information about this and more intentional work. And I think the statistics that law enforcement is sharing with us and the work that they're doing is giving us an increased awareness of the importance of this work. And so I'm really excited about not only having it impact the beginning of this school year, but also impact the routes to school all over the place, because we know there are some shifts and there are some traffic patterns and some bus routes that have history that may need to just be looked at again to increase the safety aspects for our students. So thank you. Okay. I will keep moving on here. And as I mentioned in April and May, the Wenatchee School District does not have a definitive plan for the use of the Columbia Elementary right at the moment. We will not have a school program or other agency occupy the site this fall. Just want to state that again and clarify that again, because that there was some rumors that were circulating. And some of the reasoning behind that is the time is necessary to really understand the most appropriate and economically viable program for the Columbia facility. We want to make sure that we have that site occupied in the 26, 27, or sorry, 20, sooner than that, please. The 25-26 school year. Sorry, I messed that up there. And then we also want to make sure that we understand that because we don't have another program in that building at the beginning of the school year this fall, we are still able to realize all of the cost savings that we had planned for without that occupant right away. And I'll show a little bit more about that in just a little while as we go piece by piece through the budget reduction plan for the 24-25 school year. And we'll talk about the actual cost savings that we're planning on realizing. Here we are at the end of June. We also know that our system has a large amount of movement already planned for the summer, as I've shared earlier with our maintenance and operation team, as they're moving many people throughout the district. There's a lot of things that are happening. And the closure decision timeline really did not allow for us to create other changes and opportunities to move existing programming into Columbia by this fall. And we also know that without having an occupant in there fully occupying the area, we're working with our maintenance and operation team and safety to be sure that the building is maintained and safe as well. The building will still be used for district trainings. It will be available for some short-term office space and programming as needed. And our user groups will still be able to have facility uses for the classroom space, the gym space, and the outdoor facilities. And we want to also encourage our community members to use this as well, because it is a community asset that will remain a community asset. Our long range facilities committee, we shared with them a little bit of information that I'm going to share with you right now. The district goals for the Columbia facility. Our goals are to use the facility for a Wenatchee School District programming. We want it to remain a community asset. We want to also use it to help grow our enrollment. We know that declining enrollment is something that we have projected to plague the Wenatchee School District in years to come. So how can we use Columbia Elementary and additional Wenatchee School District programming to grow that enrollment? And we also, as I mentioned already, we want to make sure folks know that it is available for indoor gym use and facility use for districts, the district and user groups, offices, and for training. And we also want to honor Columbia's history. What will not happen is it will not become a homeless shelter. It will not be abandoned. It will not be boarded up. It will not be sold. It will not be left unmaintained. It will not be an eyesore, and it will not be kept from the community, and it will not be forgotten. So we want to make sure that that is clear. Our long-range facilities committee appreciated the goals and what will not happen. They shared with us some concerns of the cost of keeping the facility maintained and not having a program in there, and the space to occupy that. They also saw the need for using it to potentially grow enrollment through a current district program. when we asked them what they believed that we could use the space for, there was a variety of ideas that were generated from that facilities committee on the topic. Everything from, I don't know, I don't have the expertise to know, to a conversation about after-school space, maybe a city recreational center. They also mentioned, obviously, Valley Academy of Learning and utilizing this space as a facility for Valley Academy to potentially grow and have some green space and, not be out in the area where they are. Or they also mentioned some alternative learning options as a way to bring students back to the district or to grow enrollment. And they also mentioned renting the space out as well. So a lot of different ideas there.
When you say renting the space out, we don't need competition, right, within our district. So that include that. I'm thinking charter, private schools that may
Right.
need facilities. Can you help me understand that relationship? Or I guess I want us to keep that building for the use of the community to grow Wenatchee School District enrollment.
Yep. I'll take us back to
Okay.
the district goals up there. It is not our goal to rent the space or to have it utilized. However, if we did bring in school district programming, we may couple that also with a local nonprofit or something in another part of that space, but
Okay.
it'll be for our uses.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question, though. I appreciate it. So we are looking to
I've heard
grow our
rumors.
enrollment. Yes.
That's
yes.
why I'm asking.
I appreciate that. Other comments? We're okay? Okay. All right, let's jump into some of the budget information here. So kind of shifting from the different pieces, stepping away from the Columbia facility at this point. Just the budget update in general, just want to share because there are things that are flying around out there, and just want to make sure that no programs are planned to be removed or significantly cut back due to budget reductions for the 24-25 school year. Just want to make sure that is known. And we'll show a couple of slides to show what our plan has been since February for budget reductions and how that has not changed. And so I just want to throw that out there. Unrelated to district budget concerns, though, I do want to let the board know that we have had trouble securing some of our after-school programming funds due to lack of availability of grants used to support the program. So there could potentially be an impact that is noticed at our middle school and our after-school programming, but we are working on securing other grants to help support that funding for this fall. We'll be able to maintain all of the after-school programming in our elementary schools based on the grants that we do have and some other special programming. So just want to let the board know that. And our update on enrollment, as you know, the projections for next year are very important, and Sean's going to spend some time with us in just a little bit talking about that and the methodical process that he has gone through with that. But we wanted to give a little bit of some registration early indicators. Kindergarten numbers are low, and we knew that going into this school year, even though our birth rates are not as low as they are projected in the coming years. We are still seeing that happen. So kindergarten numbers are low. We still have time, and we know that some of our kindergarten registrations come later in the fall. Running start numbers are higher than normal, and Sean will allude to some of those numbers in his presentation as well. TK is doing well at the 3 locations for the 4 classrooms that we offer. So we're excited about that because that to us is new enrollment, and that is growing our enrollment. The more TK classes that we offer and the more fully developed they are, the more enrollment that we get. We have also been reaching out to our office managers to track student withdrawals so that we can know where students are leaving, and so we can confirm our projections. What we do know, though, is if students are registered in other programs or throughout the valley, they don't always withdraw right away. And so we may not know some of those until a little bit later, but we are doing the work. Valley is their registration is at 270 students, so they will be at full capacity, and I would say maximum capacity as well for the school that they are working in right now. So here's our budget realization. Okay, let me catch up here. Our budget realities. So this is where we have made our proposed budget reductions for the 24-25 school year. And I just kind of want to go block by block through this. And so based on the last month and a half of work that has gone into this and some of the moving of our personnel and some of the additional retirements or resignations that have happened, how strong have we stayed with this budget reduction realization? And so for the Columbia closure, I can say that there will be at this point in our planning, there's a full realization of that $2.8 million. For middle school, I'm going to look at Kelly because I do not always get this one right, but to make it simple, there is one net add back through all of the changes, correct? So we can say that that's probably a $1.9 million realization there. For the high school, as of right now, that number is solid with our 671,000 as well. And then for the additional staffing piece, we'll realize that $1 million bucket. I do want to share that we're going to change a title and we're going to change some funding. We ended up changing the funding, but we needed to keep the title of the Assistant Director of MTSS because that position they had to evaluate staff. And so in order to evaluate staff, you have to have the director title. So we realized all the savings, but we did not change that title as mentioned earlier in our presentations on April 23rd. For the MSOC, that's Sean's department, material supplies and operating costs, and he has guaranteed that we now have the 2.5 million adjustments for next year, and he will share a little bit how that plays out then through our fund balance. And then I want to go this because since we're going in the Wayback Machine and we're talking about some things that we presented on April 23rd, I do have some other slides that appear repetitive because they are. But they're also important for us to understand about our budget reduction factors. And you've seen this probably ad nauseum at this point, but declining enrollment, declining state effort, local effort assistance, declining state regionalization funding, the rising inflationary costs annually from our IPD rise of 3.7. We know that we're exhausting our federal emergency COVID funding, so hopefully next year you will not see that on any slides. That will be exciting. And we know that our available unassigned fund balance equals our financial stability. And so if the district's unassigned fund balance reserves run too low, we know that the district would need permission from the school board to access the minimum fund balance reserves. And so we're not in any danger of that happening now, but we know that that is going to decrease over time. That fund balance will, based on declining enrollment and inflationary actions. So at the bottom line, we also show that next year, when we start talking about the 25-26 school year, our reductions will assume that the district will pass a replacement EP&O levy. We know that less levy revenue will result in larger reductions necessary for the 25-26 school year. So it'll be a full court press for that as we move into the fall. And then our long-term impacts, again, a repeat slide from April 23rd presentation. Enrollment and inflationary factors are annual issues that we must contend with. We know through the decision that we made this year that delaying reductions only increase the gap between enrollment decline and inflationary costs. We have hit that hard this year. We will hit that hard in 24-25, folks. And I'm very proud of the Wenatchee School District for us to be able to do that because the larger reductions in the current year will lessen those reductions in the future. And then all of our next year will be based on enrollment stabilizing. This is a repeat slide. This slide is from the April 23rd school board budget update. It shows that with our current reductions, we will see fund balance loss of $3 to $4 million next year that will need to be reduced in the 25-26 school year if current projections for enrollment decline hold. And so the arrows here point to that fund balance loss, and then the only category that we have filled in for the 25-26 school year there. And that is going to be the reduction number that we'll be working with for future budget reductions based on enrollment or enrollment decline. So it's old news, but I want to repeat it so that people see that and remember that, because we don't want to forget the work that we've done for this coming year, but also to remember the work that we will be working on as well. And then just clarifying and solidifying that the budget reduction magnitude of this year, it's big, but it will get us closer to a couple of different things: aligning our revenues and expenditures and aligning our staffing with enrollment, as we've talked about so much this year. I want to thank you for your time, and what questions, clarifications, or concerns that you might have for me to answer now or bring back to you later as we move forward. Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I'm very excited to bring up Executive Director of Business and Finance, Sean Fitzgerald, as he talks about the preliminary 24-25 budget. We are still going, folks. We've got this. I got the mouse. That's okay. All right.
Thank you and good evening, President Norton, members of the board, and Superintendent Kalahar. I'm here tonight to present on the second of 3 presentations on the 2024-25 budget, which is taking place between June and budget adoption at the end of August. On June 4th, I presented on the ASB capital projects, debt service, and transportation vehicle funds. And tonight, the focus will be on the general fund. Just as an overall district fund structure, school districts operate on a fund basis, and funds are a self-balancing set of accounts used for the purpose of carrying on specific activities or attaining certain objectives. And the district uses 5 funds: general ASB, capital projects, debt service, and transportation vehicle. The general fund is the district's largest fund and makes up about 90% of the entire budget and covers day-to-day operations of the district. We're going to start off with enrollment. So to recap the April presentation on enrollment, we start off with our comparison of birth rates that take place in the Wenatchee School District and Chelan County overall. As we can see here, the district birth rates peaked and we use the birth rates as an indicator for incoming kindergarten classes. Although it's not, a one-to-one, there's a general correlation between increasing birth rates coincides with larger kindergarten classes and vice versa. And so when we look at the birth rate data from the State Department of Health, we see that our district birth rates peaked in 2014 there at 634. County birth rates have peaked in 2015 at 954. And then we know that district enrollment peaked in the 2015-16 school year, which I will show in the next slide. But again, just conforming to that correlation. And then we can see in 2019, we have the numbers highlighted in green. And so when we're using kindergarten projections, we start with 5-year-olds. So we go back 5 years and we use the birth year plus 5 as our incoming kindergarten class. So as we can see here from 18 to 19, we saw an increase in birth rates, which suggests overall that if that correlation holds true, that our incoming kindergarten classes would be larger than the 23-24 class. And then, however, following in 2020, we see a sharp decline in the birth rates. And overall, you see a slight blip there in 2021, at least on the county side. But overall, beginning in 2020 up until 2022, we're seeing an overall decline in birth rates. At this time, no birth data has been available for the 2023 birth rates. As soon as that data is provided by the State Department of Health, we would upgrade this graph, but this is the best information we have at this time. Here is our enrollment, our 10-year enrollment trend going back to 2013-14. So again, we see our enrollment peaking in 15-16, and then we see a decline into the 16-17 school year all the way to 18-19, Again, we see some stabilization in 1920, but then the COVID pandemic hits and we see a large decline beginning in 2021. We see a slight increase into 21, 22, with the lockdowns lifting, would suggest that students are returning back to in-person learning. However, we're now seeing back, we see that peak in 21, 22, and 22, 23, and 23, 24 have seen declines since then. Back in February, we had projected that we were going to finish the school year around 6,738 FTE. That's excluding running start and open doors. And our June enrollment is at 6,740. So that can tell us that our enrollment for the end of the year isn't going to fall below 6,740, and that the only data remaining is we'll incorporate some of our summer and school enrollment, which would only add, even if it's a little bit, but we're well within our projections for the year. Here is our comparison for how we're finishing with 23-24 versus what we're budgeting for next year and for the next 3 years after that. So we're projecting a large decline between this year and next year. We're looking at 225 decline in enrollment. That's what we've budgeted for. And just to kind of reiterate some of the patterns that we're seeing, transitional kindergarten, we're seeing an increase from 42 to 56, and that's due to the expansion of our TK programs. So our expectation is we're going to see an increase in enrollment there. With kindergarten, although we have seen the higher birth rates and therefore a correlation to higher class sizes, we've kind of dialed it back and taken a more conservative approach on the kindergarten enrollment, just because we've seen some of the low enrollment numbers at this time. And then as we jump in, third graders under the 24-25 budget is very large. It's kind of our second grade. You can see in our second grade for 23-24, it's a very large cohort. And as you can see, it's the only 500 plus class we have until our seventh graders at 24-25. So we're experiencing the 7th through our 10th graders. We have kind of this birth bubble. We have 500 plus classes in the third grade as well. And as we see with our incoming classes, those 500 classes are disappearing, which will kind of contribute to overall enrollment decline in years to come as that birth bubble moves through. You also see that we're seeing a dramatic if we go from 23-24 to 24-25 at the 5th and 6th grade levels, we see a drop in enrollment due to the impact of our charter school in the area. We also see a large drop in our enrollment from the 10th to our 11th graders due to the increasing demand in running start enrollment, which would take away from our 11th and 12th grade enrollment at the high schools. And then last but not least, we can see our 12th graders, 23-24 is 556, and our 11th graders are 461. So that 461 class is much smaller than the outgoing 12th grader class. So right there, you're seeing just a drop of about 100 students just with that smaller class. So we see this combining factors of the charter school, smaller kindergarten classes with outgoing larger graduating classes, which is overall contributing to the enrollment decline. And as we see, we're just projecting that similar trend out for 25, 26 through 27, 28. So we're assuming that these trends are continuing, and if they follow it, then we're projecting a continued enrollment decline of triple digits for the next 4 years. So again, just a summary of what we just went over. Overall projection is that enrollment will continue to decline. And then we're seeing increase in the transitional kindergarten just due to class expansion. Looking at our elementary schools, graduating classes are larger than kindergarten. And we're paying attention to the birth rates and the correlation with our kindergarten enrollment. At the middle school level, it's the charter schools. At the high school, it's our running start. On the positive side, we're seeing increasing demand at our alternative learning. Valley is at max capacity, which helps increase our BEA enrollment. Special education, we're continuing to see an increasing demand and enrollment in that area. However, those funds are specialized and can only be used for special education, and we only receive state funding up to a point. We've also taken into account the expansion and openings of additional private schools, and we'll see the impact of what that brings for us in the fall. And then last but not least, just funding. So it's like we're funded on the budget amount from September through December. So if we do better than 225, we will ultimately be funded on student FTE, but that begins in January. So you don't lose any funding, or, you know, if we come out better than projected, but ultimately funding is adjusted on actual enrollment, but not until January. Any questions on enrollment before moving on? All right. So we're going to jump into our year-end projections and preliminary budget. So for our 23-24 year-end projections, we are projecting our ending fund balance to be 14.9 million, which is about 4.3 projected higher than budget. Now that's great. The larger the fund balance, the better. But it's important to break this number down to understand what it means. Half of this, or at least half of the savings, is due to, we started off the year higher by 2.2 million, and that was due to the district deliberately using one-time stabilization funding to build up the fund balance reserve. So instead of teaching staff being funded out of basic education or our state funding, we were using federal grant funds. And then this other 2.1 million, which I have highlighted in yellow, is due to a multitude of factors. Again, not hiring to budgeted staffing levels and deliberately not filling non-essential positions during the year to reduce costs or unfilled turnover. We also had some leave without pay factors. We also used stabilization funding like ESSER to fund staff that originally would have been funded out of basic education, and reducing discretionary spending. And the focus is on this 2.1 million because this is overall part of the $2.5 million reduction plan for MSOC and miscellaneous costs that was identified in both reduction plans this year. So we wanted to take advantage and reduce these costs. We saw cost saving areas that can contribute overall to our reduction plan without affecting staff. And that's what we're kind of incorporating here. Again, projections will be reviewed and refined by the adoption date in August. And this is a conservative projection. So if we finish better than what we're currently projecting right now, we will review and evaluate for reductions for 25-26. And even with the savings identified this year, overall fund balance is on a downward trajectory, which I will go on in a couple of slides. Any questions on this before moving on? So just to reiterate some of our goals for the year end, from the written analysis, our goal was to maintain strong fund balance reserves and minimize fund staff reductions through increasing revenues and reducing expenditures. And this is being achieved in part by the $2.5 million MSOC reduction and any additional savings we will find when we close out for the year end. It is important to note that the district intentionally built up reserves through the use of stabilization funding like ESSER from the federal government. This funding primarily came from ESSER with other funding sources as well. And the district used this funding to maintain the staffing levels while enrollment declined. And just pointing out that for the current 23-24 school year, we had about $2.8 million in ESSER funds remaining, which will be exhausted and used up by August 31st. So here's our preliminary budget and forecast. So right now we're projecting for 24-25, we have a $4.3 million deficit. Now that does not mean we have to reduce by that amount, but reductions will be necessary if enrollment continues to decline based on our projections. When we start looking at 25-26 and beyond, we're seeing a substantial increase in revenues despite declining enrollment. And this is due to the vote if assuming EP&O levy passes in February of 2025. Ultimately, we also have under other financing uses, $500,000 for each year. And this is just a transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund in case our maintenance and operations needs to address any emergencies or priority needs on our maintenance side, because we do not have a sustainable revenue source in our capital projects fund in the short term. So we will need to look at, if the fund balance isn't fully used up in capital projects by this year, we'd be looking at this fund balance, any available fund balance in there, which would be limited, but just kind of more as an insurance policy to take care of any emergency or priority needs. I do want to emphasize budget reductions have been built into this forecasting for each year in order for us to maintain a positive fund balance on the unassigned down below. As you can see, I think we have 1 year in 26-27 being able to have unassigned fund balance that would be above $1 million. And then we start seeing this decrease in 27-28. And even though we're assuming we're passing a levy, we would start seeing revenue sources in the 25-26 school year. We see the revenues and expenditures start to, at least the expenditures start to catch up to the revenues in 27-28. And that's due to a couple of factors. One, on the expenditure side, we're assuming that inflation costs would continue to increase at a 3.7% IPD. And then also on the revenue side, we have the levy is subject to an enrollment cap lid. So knowing, despite what the district goes out for and the voter approved amount, there's going to be a cap if there is continuing declining enrollment. And so assuming that enrollment cap with the declining enrollment, then you're going to see the levy funds being unable to match those rising expenditures due to inflation. So I know that's a lot of information. Before I move on, is there any questions on preliminary budget or any of the forecasted numbers?
Because we're going to be I'm going to talk about the capital fund a little bit later on. I really want to highlight that other financing uses. You said it, but I think I want to repeat it. It's $500,000 a year because we have not created a reserves in a capital fund. It's using operating funds, and you've mentioned it. It's there. We all need to recognize it.
Correct. So what is the assumptions and methodology going into this budget and forecasting? So overall, we have continued enrollment decline projected. We're also assuming that no significant state legislative funding efforts will occur. It's been a while. I mean, we're going into a long session for the next year, so we won't know what the state is going to decide budget-wise until the end of April. But for the last couple of years, there hasn't been really any significant action by the state to provide additional school funding beyond only in special areas like special education and some slight increases to funding in MSOC and certain staffing positions, which is appreciated, but in no term addresses just the rising cost, even just addressing inflation. And so we cannot assume that the state's going to step in and bail the school districts out despite what is occurring statewide. We're also assuming budget reductions are taken every year just to align staffing with enrollment. We're also assuming the P&O levy passes subject to an enrollment lid. We're also assuming the inflationary factor, as I've mentioned before, of 3.7% IPD. That is the current IPD rate that's been enacted by the state. I mean, it could be 2%, it could be 5%, it could be 3.8 next year. We don't know. So we just use the rate that the state has approved and what we use for. We're also budgeting for a 30% annual increase for an insurance. Last year it increased by a similar amount. And we received a letter from the Schools Insurance Association of Washington, who is our insurance pool, and said prepare for an increase between 20 and 30%. So that's what we're going to budget for and assume going forward. We also budget for 100% staffing, which we know with turnover, unfilled positions. So we know ultimately that part of that deficit that we're seeing isn't going to be fully materialized because we know we don't maintain 100% staffing for the entire year. We're also going to ensure maximizing K-3 class size compliance as best we can. And then also we just, in addition to the budget, is a $6.6 million in capacity for carryover and unexpected revenues and expenditures that rise during the school year. But this has no effect on budgeted fund balance. Again, it's just authorizing additional reserves if necessary during the school year and may or may not be used. Any questions before moving on to fund balance?
You know, in the interest of comments on outside, everybody's pretty concerned about the annual increase in insurance. Everybody's hearing about it locally. I just want to comment that I read an interview last week with I think it's the president of Lloyd's, the world's largest reinsurance agency that insures all the insurance companies. And this is a global phenomenon brought about by all sorts of international climate and risk factors. And so if anybody's wondering about have we got good insurance providers, that's the kind of thing that's happening all around the world.
Mm-hmm. So here's a breakdown of our fund balance. So just going back to our written analysis, understanding fund balance. Our fund balance is our district's reserves or savings account, and not all fund balance reserves are available to use at any time. And we have 4 different types: assigned, committed, restricted, and unassigned. And with a caveat with unassigned is, although it may be used for any purpose, the district has a board policy to maintain 5% of budgeted expenditures as a minimum fund balance to maintain operations, to pay bills, process monthly payroll, and maintain operations. And this minimum fund balance comes from the district's unassigned reserves. So here's a breakdown of the beginning fund balance, projected beginning fund balance for next year. And so we can see we have fund balance about 14.9 million. If that projection stays true, either will increase or decrease. We will know when we close out the year end. Really just highlight, we have a number of, you can see a number of restricted and committed items that leaves the unassigned and the unassigned minimum fund balance as separate parts. We have committed to other purposes, and this is continuing just to utilize fund balance to offset budget reductions that the board authorized, and the $500,000 for capital project needs or emergencies. And then our estimated ending fund balance, if the projections held true and we utilize $4.3 million in fund balance, our expectation would be that the committed balance would be used for emergency maintenance, and that we had utilized a certain amount of fund balance to help offset budget reductions for the 24-25 school year. And then just highlighting, as you can see with the smaller fund balance, the unassigned fund balance gets smaller. And so once we dip below that, then you're starting to look into the minimum fund balance reserves as, you know, for necessary payment. Budget timeline. So here we are, June 25th. So our deadline for submitting the budget, preliminary budget to the ESD for review is July 10th. And then August 13th, we'll have a public hearing based on the ESD review. The numbers will no longer be preliminary. They'll be reviewed and refined and presented at a public hearing, followed by budget adoption at the second board meeting in August. And then again, the budget is due by state law to OSPI on the last day of the school year, which is Friday, August 30th. Between now and August 13th, again, the presentations from today and 3 weeks ago were preliminary. They're going to be revised and reviewed and sent to the ESD. And we'll address and incorporate any feedback and present the proposed budget on August 13th with those revisions. Any questions?
Thank you very much. And I thank all the staff who gave you input for putting that package together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to, we have no discussion, so action items. Looks like first up is the policies, second read.
Yeah, policy's second read. After our first read, there were a variety of requests and some clarifying fixes to the board policies as they were presented at the time. Since then, Kim and I have gone through the policies. We've made the requested and appropriate updates. We resubmitted the information to the board and did not receive any other questions or concerns. So I believe that we can move forward with a motion to accept the policies unless there's further discussion.
Do I have a motion?
Yes, I would like to present that we approve the policies as presented for second read.
And I second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? No, looked good to me. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on, superintendent's contract. Yeah, that's what I have, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Superintendent's contract. So I'll go ahead and introduce this one. Since, as you recall, at the June 4th, 2024 meeting, the board voted unanimously to amend the superintendent contract to remove the title of interim and to extend the contract for an additional year through 2026. So Maria and I have worked with Corey to complete the proposed changes to the contract, which is being presented this evening. It's been circulated to the other board members. I do want to point out to anyone that may be listening that under the existing agreement, Dr. Kalahar was entitled to a salary increase at the level of IPD, which is like a CPI. You've heard us mention it before. He has declined to take that salary increase. So the starting compensation on this contract that becomes effective July 1st of 2024 is at the exact same pay as the prior version with no increase. So with that, I guess I can, if there's more discussion, we can move to a motion and then discuss after a motion.
I move to approve the amended and restated superintendent's employment contract.
I would like to second.
All right, moved in second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I do want to have a discussion.
All right.
Okay. The importance of this action item is much, much greater than just a contract extension. And that's really why I wanted to say something. When I'm stopped on the street, people ask me questions about how the district works and the importance of the superintendent. And this discussion, I think, addresses the kind of interests that people have. It's about everything we expect of the superintendent. If you just look at today's agenda, we talked about highly capital students. We had ambitious career and technical education plans. We listened to having to climb a high mountain in renovating math and English arts skills. We've got tough budgets for general fund operations, and we're looking for funds for capital projects and physical infrastructure. That's kind of the menu. We know that Corey Kalahar, Dr. Kalahar is here because we made a nationwide search for a superintendent and ended with a unanimous decision to choose him as our executive leader for the Wenatchee School District. The removal of the word interim is overdue, and the extension of the contract is timely because we must work together in the long run. And I think that's part and parcel of this contract renewal. Elected school board delegates to the superintendent the executive responsibility and powers to manage the schools and the education services they provide. The superintendent is the only person who reports directly to the board. The superintendent is also the professional advisor to the board, which all makes his leadership the key to success. The board's oversight role becomes one of support for the superintendent using coaching and encouragement. What matters is the achievement of high performance and good results. The superintendent leads the invaluable team of education and student welfare personnel who can make this possible. The district faces great challenges on behalf of its students. But what I want to say is every challenge generates its opportunity. This is true for the students' world and in the district's provider world. I like words that Dickens published in 1859 to describe the situation the school district and we all face. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And our goal of moving forward together is to make it possible to grab the problems with one hand while the other transforms them into growth and improvement. The uncertain and fast-shifting world is challenging for today's youth, economically, for their careers, and personally for their lives to be fulfilled, to become fulfilled citizens. What they learn needs to adapt, and the skills taught need to be extended. Methods and technologies won't stay still. The physical infrastructure of the district is in urgent need of renewal. The district's long-term facilities committee takes one step down that road, which is very much one of collaborating with our outside external partners from the wider community. If we look inside ourselves, the school district has opened doors for the whole diverse and a universe of Wenatchee students. It provides the widest range of education alternatives, areas of study, extracurricular activities, and advanced curricula in our region. Let's support the value of its scope and the way it reaches for excellence. Long-term progress in all these areas is a huge and demanding ask from one contracted executive. If the rest of us pitch in constructively, we'd be helping ourselves in the long run. And that's what I wanted to say, because this is not just a simple contract. It's a relationship between all of us. We are looking at Corey to hopefully approve his extended contract and amended contract. We depend on him. He depends on all of us. Let's go for it together.
I don't have a quote from 1859, but I do have something to say. I mean, you know, as always, I tend to agree with Martin quite a bit. But I think the elimination of the interim was highly important for the stability and the continuity of the work that's being done in the district. Interim oftentimes is seen as temporary, provisional, and again, when we did that national search, we knew that in the long term, Dr. Kelleher would be able to provide that for the school district. Although we have been faced with quite a bit of challenges our first year as in your interim role. You know, with anything, there's always room for improvement, room for growth. But you know, you have the best interests of the district, of employees, teachers, staff, and most importantly, our students. So that comes appreciated. And not only are we, by removing that interim and extending one more year, are we allowing that stability and continuity, but also the start of rebuilding that trust factor that we haven't had that for a few years now. So I look forward to the work.
I asked Tucker if he wanted to make any comments, and so he provided me with just a statement to read since he knew he wouldn't be available tonight and actually unable to vote. It says, hello, everyone. I apologize I couldn't be there to say this in person. Traditionally, after a superintendent search, the selected candidate is given a 3-year contract and the title of superintendent. While I understand the reasoning last year's board used to justify the interim title, I think that the district is in need of stability. Giving Dr. Kelleher the full superintendent title and extending his contract to include another year serves the dual purposes of giving Dr. Kelleher the stability he needs to thrive in his role and the district the stability it needs to address the difficult challenges that lay ahead of it. Dr. Kelleher has my full support, and I look forward to what the district will accomplish under his leadership. Thank you. And so I will just add, I spoke to it briefly the last time. When we selected the superintendent, we were looking at a sort of unusual situation where the whole board could have turned over immediately. So it didn't make sense to tie a new board to too much to a leader, because as Maria pointed out, the relationship is super important. And I think you've built a very good relationship with this board. This board is operating very well, I think, under your leadership. I know this year was not without challenges. It certainly wasn't perfect. But we also realized that we were selecting somebody that didn't have the years of superintendent experience. And I think you've taken that very seriously in your growth strategies and your mindset. And I just appreciate all the work you've put in a challenging year and that you've worked with us on and really being accountable to our community, understanding how important that is. I do think that removing the interim title is both deserved for the accomplishments you've had over this year, but also to help build that stability for the district going forward, because I think you, among others, will be the most accountable to anyone else we could see here, because you've been in our system for a long time. You know the members of our community, and I know that you feel that we're all in this together. So I feel that's important. Any other comments?
I just want to say thank you for all the kind words and the faith that you have in me. And it's just an honor and a privilege for me to be able to serve in this capacity. So thank you so much.
Oh, there's no more comments. I think we're actually supposed to take a roll call vote. So Martin.
Aye.
Maria. Aye. And I am aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, I'm honored and privileged to be able to serve the school district for another 2 years and look forward to great things together, working as a collaborative team and a community. And the next action item is we have a resolution. Let's see here, the resolution, the fund transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund. The fund transfer is for two general reasons. The first reason is to cover the soft costs and change orders related to the softball complex above the $4 million mark. And the second purpose is to use the funds as a short-term solution to the fact that we currently do not have a revenue source for our capital projects a fund, which has been mentioned now a couple of times. And I think that that's important. We do need to develop a long-term plan. And part of that work has been the completion of our facilities survey and study that happened in 2023, and we approved in early 2024, but also contracting with our pre-bond team and the creation of a long-term facilities plan. We know that that work needs to be done. What we are suggesting here is an interim plan to address this problem. Some of the numbers that were asked for, a 3-year average of capital project spending is $593,000. A 5-year average of capital project spending is $829,000. So just an idea of what we spend on those capital projects opportunities. This just helps us do that work in the future moving forward. So I appreciate the board looking into this and coming up with or helping us with that short-term solution. And then moving forward, as Sean has shared, that $500,000 that we'll do each year, just so that we can help keep some sort of funds for our aging facilities at this point until that long-term plan is fully realized.
Great. I would like to propose a motion to approve resolution number 0424, which is to transfer funds from the general fund to the capital projects fund for the construction of the softball field.
And I second that motion.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I advertised I was going to say something. So although it's repetitive, I want to emphasize that, at the moment, the capital fund reserves are depleted. And it is urgent, and I urge that we take an initiative to raise funds and replenish them. And I'm glad to see that that is a topic for the Long-Term Facilities Committee. And these reserves would conserve, we see the needs, things like HVAC or roofs or completing softball fields. This is an interim measure. And it is the only available resource we've got right now for a legal liability to complete the softball field. I would just like to see it have minimum use and put in a pep talk. Let's hope that we can find a better long-term solution for capital reserves.
Yeah, I agree and echo that. I think we put a lot of faith into being able to run a bond potentially in the next year. And so we may be short-sighted the intention of what are we going to do with the capital funding. So I do think now as potential bond projects are further out on the horizon that we need to look seriously at what we're doing with the capital fund projects. Any other discussion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Motion carries.
Excellent. Moving forward to the superintendent's report, I have three things that I want to share. One, I just want to share that I was able to attend Together for Youth's Key Leader Prevention event. It was 2 weeks ago. But there's been a gap in between our board meetings. So I just wanted to share, though, that this key leader prevention training at NCW Community Foundation Conference Room, it was an action-packed 2-hour event that began with a presentation from the Drug Task Force. And I got to meet Gambit, the drug sniffing dog. So that was super fun to have the dog in the presentation as well. But it was really interesting. They gave us a rundown on the areas most prevalent narcotics, and the concerns that they're seeing not only from patrol, but also in the jails and then on the streets actually too. So it was an interesting look at what narcotic problems are plaguing the Wenatchee area. We also want to just share an exciting kind of new initiative called FAQ Fridays that we're going to launch on Friday, July 22nd. This initiative is designed to keep our community informed and engaged over summer break as much as they would like to be. Sometimes people want to maybe not be engaged, but this is an opportunity to engage over summer break with a short weekly video segment posted on our social media, where I'll be addressing questions submitted by parents, students, and community members, and sharing valuable updates and information about the district plans for the upcoming school year. And how it'll work is questions will be submitted online via direct messaging on social media or through our website. And we'll work with the team to select and answer a couple of questions each week. And the initiative aims to keep everybody informed and involved as we prepare for the challenges and opportunities of the new school year. And I'm looking forward to the community's participation and engagement in this endeavor. And as we mentioned, together, we can ensure that everyone stays informed about district plans and development. So I'm excited about that through the summer. And then just give a shout out. I got a letter today from Chris Reichdahl, Superintendent of Public Instruction, and Chief John Batiste from the Washington State Patrol. And again, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Washington State Patrol, wants to congratulate us and our administration and our transportation team, whose diligent and tireless efforts protect the safety of Washington's students on our school buses. The recent Washington State Patrol annual inspection of your school buses show that your school district has again demonstrated exceptional results. Gosh, I keep kicking that. I apologize. For the past 2 years, the results in your district have been outstanding, and these results demonstrate your understanding of school safety. When I shared it with Director Jen C. in transportation, in a great leadership forum, she said, we have an exceptional team here in the transportation department. We have a great group of mechanics who take care of our entire fleet, and we're taking it back to teamwork. And so she is proud of each and every one of them. And I appreciate that response from Leader Jen. So just wanted to celebrate them. And that is it for the superintendent update.
Right. Martin?
Because it's the season of celebrations, very rapid fire, graduations, bilingual migrant students awards, transitions, final meeting of the Student Advisory Council. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And I will just add, I enjoyed going to participating in the graduation ceremonies that we had, both at Wenatchee High School. The weather couldn't have been better. It was great celebration. West Side, I really enjoyed having it at the Town Toyota Center. I felt like it got a much better crowd. It just felt much more well attended. So I was glad that space worked out for them, and that it was one of my all-time favorite speeches when the student referred to his mom as the arsonist. That was the best. I will remember it forever. So you have to watch it online if you want to know what I'm talking about. So anyway, it was just a long time between meetings, but yeah, congratulations to our seniors, and looking forward to a nice, quiet summer, I hope. And if there's nothing else, we can adjourn. All right.